I feel the time. I feel things rotting, I feel things degrading, I feel things tearing themselves apart because we're not doing it in time. It's just, I have to recognize the fact that everything's important. And there, some things are more stable, that's one argument, but everyone is trying to do the same job, and that's keep things in shape and keep them alive and keep them there despite time going by. In early 2009, I went out and took a tour, gave myself a tour of the vessel and climbed all over the barge and into her hold and kind of surveyed her from a shipbuilder perspective, and issued a memo immediately after that suggesting that we pursue a demolition perspective. It was clear to me that she was beyond traditional means of repair or maintenance or preservation, and we had to do something about it. So I rang the bell, and that, I think, did kick off the greater process of restricting access and denying or rejecting funding for intermediate projects, and immediately saying there's only one way to go.
National Historic Landmarks are properties that are associated with the nation's history and heritage, and it's the highest level of designation, historic designation from the federal government outside of National Park Service units. There are more than 83,000 National Register properties listed on the National Register of Historic Properties. And of those 83,000, only 2,500, a little more than 2,500, are National Historic Landmarks. They are often, one of a kind or associated with a story that is important to our heritage. It could be civil rights, it could be maritime history, it could be farm workers movement. And so these are national stories, and there aren't that many properties that have the close association with these national stories. The withdrawal of an NHL designation, sometimes also referred to de-designation, for federal agencies, it's part of the Section 106 process and the consultation process with the SHPO and the Advisory Council for Historic Preservation. In this case, the National Park Service will do what's similar to a nomination, but showing why the property no longer qualifies for designation. This one is pretty straightforward because it's lost the qualities that had made it possible for it to be designated. And there are 29 properties that have had their NHL designation withdrawn, and 3 of those are vessels. There's a pretty straightforward, like 2 to 3 page report as to why the property was designated an NHL originally, and then the factors that led up to its de-designation. And so while these properties are no longer National Historic Landmarks, the fact that they were landmarks is not lost.
Once the park reached the point where we were going to have to go to demolition, there were a number of things that had to be done, including convincing the State Historic Preservation Office that this was necessary. And then full documentation by the Historic American Engineering Record. It also included putting together a management summary describing how we got to that point, since we're talking about a National Historic Landmark that we're now going to actively demolish. We were to look at anything that we could use on the vessel, either for our own historic ships or could be used maybe by other museums for historic ships, machinery and such. And finally, that we would tell the story of the Wapama in this park. We brought in outside experts. They participated in the value analysis with us. At the time, we looked at things like basically stabilizing the hull, and people could look at the vessel, saving the aft portion, which at the time seemed to be in pretty good shape, the deck houses in particular, and the engine room. To total demolition and to total restoration, which, based on the work we had recently done on the Thayer, was going to be more than $30 million and really not going to happen. The alternative that I think the staff was kind of rooting for was saving the aft portion of the vessel, stabilizing it, and people could then go into the passenger areas, the salon, see the engine room. But ultimately, when the money got figured in, the only alternative was really taking what we could and demolishing the rest of the vessel. Everyone sort of saw where we needed to go, but we weren't quite ready to make that step to say, we have to demolish this NHL. And I think what finally kicked us all over the edge was when Phil Irwin and his staff went over there and said, it's decaying at a much faster rate. The after house is beginning to go. You know, there's no more holding on to it. We need to move forward. And so we sort of faced the music and started doing the compliance.
I think the majority of folks understood that it was something that needed to be done, even though they didn't like it. What made the message effective was that we were honest about it. We didn't try to pretend that this was a good thing, or we were happy it was happening, or I don't think we ever said it's none of our fault, if some outside thing forced us. I think we were pretty honest with the public, and we said we really did not do well with this ship. We did the best we could, and given where we are, this is the best we can do. And I think because we were honest, I think people believed it.
I think that's why we ultimately, as a park, could survive the demolition of an NHL ship, is that people came to consensus that yes, in fact, it's a fait accompli. We're where we are because of 60 years worth of events that we had no control over.